I'm very, very delighted to be introducing the next session now. We'll be having 2 keynotes and then 1 moderated talk. And the first keynote will be held by Robin Stalker, former CFO of adidas and experienced board member. Second keynote will be held by Axel Berger, who is the lead of digital and sustainability at Haniel. And then later on, we'll be having a moderated talk with both of them, because we will definitely enjoy their experience and their perspective on financing the transition, moderated by Matthias Ballweg. I'm very delighted. And I'll be introducing all 3 of them on stage: Robin Stalker, Axel Berger, and Matthias Ballweg. One loud round of applause, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Virginia. I think a couple of people might come in a minute only, because the other panels are now closing. Thank you for those being here already. There is so much more intro to say. You nicely presented our 2 speakers, which is, I think, the perfect setup for our talk, which we claim to say, getting the controller on board, how to hack the financial systems of companies, so especially non-financial KPIs and non-financial targets somehow get to eye level, somehow get to incentivization, how to make sure to have a language for the discussion about circularity that is not only including the CFO, but allows the CFO to drive the discussion. And I'm very much looking forward to our 2 impulses. And I would say, without further ado, Robin, over to you for a start.
Great, thanks very much, Matthias. And a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be at such a conference, because I'm absolutely convinced that circular economy will play a significant role in moving our businesses, our whole world, to be much, much more sustainable. Exactly how big that role is, however, I don't really know. I can't say. I don't think you know exactly either. But what I do know is that finance will play a considerable role in this transformation. In fact, I would almost suggest that finance will make the difference to whether or not we're going to be successful on this transformation or not. How many of you have heard already about the belief that accountants will save the planet? Well, don't laugh. I mean, haven't heard of it? Okay, well, I actually don't think it's all that silly, really. If you think about it, it's possibly quite logical. Now, maybe I'm a bit biased. I'm an accountant, or I'm a finance guy. And by the way, when I say finance guy, that's gender neutral. It's an Antipodean thing. We're all guys, okay? But I don't mean that I can specifically save the planet, but what I do mean is, and my message is, that finance as a profession certainly could. I mean, accountants, and here I'll include in that the controllers, the analysts, the various financial managers who are involved in the decision-making here, it is our task to make or to facilitate better decision-making. We want to ensure that better decisions are made. In fact, we want to ensure that best decisions are made. We make the scenarios. We help cost or estimate costs. We estimate also returns. We look at the trade-offs. We look at the alternatives and try and evaluate those alternatives. I would say, therefore, and this is my first message, that it's absolutely important for circular economy initiatives to be successful, that you're speaking with your finance guys and that you're involving them as early as possible in your plans and in the options that you're pursuing. Ideally, they should already be involved. They should be the ones driving us more and more into this circular economy and all other initiatives to bring us into a more sustainable situation. And because, if for no other reason, maybe a selfish business reason, because it's in the best interests of the business to become, as quickly as possible, more sustainable. But my second message is, unfortunately, not all financial professionals see it like that yet, or haven't yet quite understood that that is, in fact, their role. So we need to help them get there. In my experience in dealing with finance people and having this debate about sustainability generally, it's always helpful to start asking, how do they define success? How does their business define success? And when you get into the detail of this, and you ensure that we're looking at the right sort of timeline, not just the short-term timeline, the longer-term timeline for a business or an enterprise, then you're forced to move away from discussions on short-term financial factors and start to consider more longer-term and definitely what people call non-financial factors, or I call pre-financial factors. These need to be quantified. These need to be embedded in the business strategy. They need also to be, and this is important, ladies and gentlemen, they need to be embedded in the remuneration, the incentives, the bonus schemes for the business management. And that's obviously on the old tried and true principle that what gets measured does actually get done. But to quantify this and to ensure that we are able to make the right trade-offs in this transformation journey, and indeed it is a journey, then we need, and that's my third message, we need to ensure that we're adequately pricing key externalities, or the so-called non-financials. And here it's, as an example, the CO2 emissions, the cost of deforestation, and various other so-called externalities at the moment. We need to do that so that we are able to make the right trade-offs. Certainly we need, at some stage, the regulator and the politicians to help in this. We need them because we need them to help create a level playing field across industrial sectors and also across national borders. And that is obviously, as an example, the carbon border adjustment mechanism here in Europe. But ladies and gentlemen, we don't just need them, we definitely also need the experience and the skill sets of the finance people. That's who's going to have to value these externalities and these other factors that need to be involved in the decision making. So I don't think finance is part of the problem. I very much believe, ladies and gentlemen, that finance is a significant part of the solution. And that's what I look forward to talking with you about over the next few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. And coming from this perspective, I'm very much looking forward to you, Axel, especially around the topic of non-financial KPIs, where you have a specific expertise having pushed this at Haniel. The stage is yours for a short impulse.
Thank you. I'm not 100. You're already in the machine room, and I'm not 100% sure that finance is not also part of the problem, and I will try to explain why that is. So I'm coming from climate solutions first, because I've just been to Berlin recently and saw a presentation of Johan Rockström from the PIK, and he said the 1.5 degrees is over. The only question is how fast we will get back to it. That scared me a lot. And now taking or assuming that only 100 companies worldwide are responsible for 70% of the industrial emissions worldwide. Assuming that, we realize that companies have a huge, huge responsibility. And not only because they create that direct emissions, also because they create the products that we want, obviously, but they also influence us in our buying behavior, so they create even more emissions in the end. So huge responsibility. But the question is, why are they not obeying to that responsibility? Why are they not solving the problem at the same time? And the question is very easy. It's about money, right? It's all about money, and obviously, when we talk about money, in the end, we only talk about the symptoms. So what are the solutions that we have on hand? First, we create value also on a non-financial level and bring that into our balance sheets, which is not going to happen short term. And usually, at this point, when I'm speaking at this point, I'm shouted at as an ideologist, and I should probably read Milton Friedman to understand how economy really works. But we are pretty sure that we will not change our economic system short term, so value in our balance sheet, unlikely that this is going to happen. The second thing that we can do is obviously cost integration, which means, and we are trying that on a European basis with the European trading system, so make externalized costs that the companies are pushing onto society and creating huge debts for the next generations to solve. And I will have to pay for it with my taxes, which I don't want to, but that's what's happening. So the second opportunity is to integrate these costs into the balance sheets of our companies. And then it becomes a value. So we are trying that with the European trading system and with taxes and so forth. Obviously, huge lobbying against it because nobody wants to have higher costs. But this would really turn into value and would create innovation. Too slow. And we are not spreading that out fast enough onto all business sectors. So I'm not sure if this is also going to be a solution in the short term, but we need to be quick. So the next solution is that we get active and take our responsibility as companies. And that's what we try to do at Haniel, and that's what we are trying to tackle. This means that you need to integrate sustainability, circularity, climate change mitigation deeply into your management routines. In the moment, it's something on a meta level. Oh, we have carbon reduction, so CO2 emissions. Is that measured? Are you incentivized on that? Usually, you're not. But that's what needs to be happened. And you were talking about measurability, and that's perfectly right. We need to make KPIs, systems that are measurable, but that they are on an equal level as our financial KPIs. So we are an investment company. Our highest KPI on a financial level is the total shareholder return. No surprise. But what is now the highest level of sustainability? We need a rating scheme how we can measure sustainability of a company and hold it against it. And not only that we thereby make sustainability measurable, and we have our own rating scheme, we also need to incentivize on it. And that is usually the interesting time when I talk to managers. I usually ask, are you or your management team incentivized on sustainability topics? And usually the answer is no. And then I don't believe this manager that sustainability is really an issue for him, because otherwise he would handle it with the same consequence as his financial priorities, or at least on a similar level. I mean, if you don't have cash, you cannot pay anything. That's fair and that's fine. But at a similar level to that, you should also have your sustainability KPIs. So if you've done that, obviously, then you're really deeply into measuring and steering sustainability as such. But now getting a level deeper. And then we are at the controlling level. Now, how do we get these controllers on board? If we are not incentivized, if we don't measure sustainability on a high level in a company, it's about the business cases. And carbon dioxide emissions are a good example. Why? Because there's a, shitload full of business cases and of measures that we can do that actually have a positive business case. But what we very often see is that these investments are cut because times are rough, and we need to cut. So it's a sustainability bucket, so let's take that away. We can't afford it. Let's do that at a later stage. And that's dumb, because sometimes they have really good business cases. And that's what we need to tickle out. We need to talk about these business cases. We need to talk about returns of investments and show our controllers, our CFOs, the good returns of some of the measurements that we can use to decarbonize, for example, or the same thing in a circular economy environment. So that's what I would definitely shouting for. What we also need to do when we look at the business cases is to take a long-term perspective. Because, for example, when I look at EVs, electrical vehicles in our delivery fleets, tough topic. But usually the management is not looking on a TCO level, so on a total cost of ownership. When I look at a total cost of ownership because of maintenance, because of fueling costs, already today, EVs in many countries have a better business case than diesel-fueled engine or combustion engine vehicles. So there is a positive business case, but I need to look at it at a total cost of ownership. And the last thing I would quote for is that we also need to do changes on an organizational basis, which means we need another profile in our CFOs. I'm not talking about you, Robin, definitely not. But we need CFOs that also take non-sustainable value into account and take responsibility for it. But at the same time, we need sustainability guys that have a business understanding. And if we bring that together, then we can talk on eye level with the controller and the CFO, and maybe then talk about the right things that they understand. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll get back to some of the things you said in a minute, but maybe starting exactly where you ended. We need sustainability guys that have a business understanding, and that maybe push that a little bit in a provocative way back to you, Robin. When we had our pre-discussion, you would have framed it probably the other way around. Let's not give sustainability guys the responsibility. Let's rather make sure that the business guys have the sustainability understanding than the other way around.
That's exactly right, but I mean, we need experts at various levels. And often we need particular sustainability experts to kick things off, because this is a new field for most businesses. But my premise is that if it's good for the business, then it should be and must be embedded in the normal business decision-making process. And therefore, it's the business owner's responsibility to consider the sort of things that Axel was saying, just as he also considers the historic financial KPIs. And that's why my particular bias for finance is because it's all about the quality of decision-making and the trade-offs that we have to take. And that is, means that we have to reflect financial and these so-called non-financials within our decision-making. And that's a finance job, not necessarily a sustainability expert job.
Well, what you both said, let's make sure it's in the incentivization. You said that let's make sure that people are incentivized, having non-financial KPIs on eye level with financial KPIs. You did that already at Haniel. What's the trick? What can anyone learn how to bring non-financial KPIs into board level incentivization?
Well, holy crap, that's a difficult one. It sounds a little like a silver bullet, and there is none. And obviously, you can do a lot with grassroots and convincing people, but with all fairness, if you really want to push that, it needs to come from shareholders and needs to come from top management. Because otherwise, it gets extremely difficult. And in the end, obviously, you also want to have your top management incentivized on these things. So it needs to be the supervisory board, it needs to be the shareholders asking for it, which is the tough piece. And therefore, and then on the other hand, looking at sustainability also from a business and financial perspective, and taking it out of this meta world. If you translate it to the terms that classical management understands, which is IRR, which is ROI, and so forth, then you get an open door. So CFOs suddenly start to listen to you. That's my experience. Like they suddenly are willing to discuss, for example, your CapEx allocation, because you can prove to them that there is a financial return. Saying that, bringing that into the incentive schemes is a way harder thing, and that only works when you get to the point, what also Robin quoted, is when it is deeply integrated into the management routine of management, because then they have the feeling that they can influence it, that they can steer it, that they can make an improvement, and then they also feel responsible for it. If they don't, they will do everything they can not to get incentivized on it.
Not everything probably is possible to bring into those schemes. I remember one sentence that it was the business of business is business, right? That's something was valid for decades probably. You mentioned it might not be anymore. So what does this mean?
So I mean, I think we've taken far too narrow a view about what is success for so long, and so much has been just quantified in terms of short-term financials. But if you look at most family companies, they do have a longer horizon and are maybe somewhat more open to looking at things that maybe don't give the immediate return, but do give a return in the future. And therefore, I would take that business, the business of business is business, but say, look at the time horizon. Because if I'm selfishly looking after my own business, I need to understand what is my situation in the next X years. Can I be competitive? Do I even have a business model that will be valid or will work in this next period? What must I do? And if we seriously and honestly look at what's happening in our world and the existential threat that we have through climate change and the risks that all businesses will face with this over a period of time, then I'm forced myself to think, well, how do I get myself in a position where I don't just survive, my business model, if I change it or not, survives, but I'm competitive in this and maybe I'm market leader in this. And then I'm forced to think about, I need to be quicker than the other guy in doing this transformation and better. And therefore, the mindset and the time frame is a bit decoupled from what I think we've historically been far too focused on. And we target people also. If you think of fund managers, if you think of, I have a bit to do with asset owners. If you think of the asset owners, they can think of 30-year pension fund returns or whatever, but the asset managers are thinking on quarterly returns, and they're incentivized in this way. So we need to make sure that the incentivization that we put into the system is over a longer time period.
And may I add to that? Because that's exactly the point when I said we're talking about symptoms. What you are describing is we need to change the system, even if it's just on a corporate level with companies that are thinking long-term. But what I experienced in the past years is that this is just a very little number of companies that are really doing this, and these values that they create is really built on thin ice. When it's getting like now 3 years in a recession in Germany, a lot of companies, too many companies are pulling back. And now I find myself back, business of business is business, which means now I'm starting, and I don't believe in that because that's a 50-year-old system that is not, we had 3.8 billion people on this planet at the time when Milton Friedman built it. But now we are translating sustainable value into financial value so that controllers, CFOs understand, because that's what they're used to, that's fitting in our business, into our economic system. But there's also a good thing about this, which is if we can do that, if we can translate it, then this business model can scale as hell. So I saw the discussion this morning with Sandrine. Yeah, getting rich is probably the wrong term, but being profitable with sustainability is also the key to scale it and to really create impact. And if we are not able to do that, then we are stuck between business of business is business and us trying to convince people that sustainability has a value by itself.
Last question. This language is somehow complicated, right? If you are, we push this responsibility a little bit to the sustainability guy, saying, hey, you need to learn how to talk with the controller, use a business term, use a business case language. How can we make sure that the controller also accepts that responsibility, because he's the expert in solving trade-offs, right? No one is better in solving trade-offs and dealing with trade-offs on a day-to-day basis than the controller, because they're always conflicting goals. Also right now.
He doesn't solve them. He presents it so they can be solved. I mean, he presents the alternatives. He presents, or she presents a basis for making decisions. That's why I'm repeating myself a little bit, but that's why I strongly believe that a good finance person needs to understand that success, or the decision that we need to make that makes us successful, and the various levels of decisions, cannot just be reduced to pure short-term financials. And so there needs to be an understanding of so-called non-financials. We do it already. I mean, successful businesses cannot be successful if they don't invest in talent, if they don't make a good place to work for talent, if they don't do various other things that are not necessarily immediately found in the short-term financials. So I think it's and Axel suggests this also, we need to basically retrain a lot of finance people to make sure that they understand this. That's why I said earlier, how do you define success? What is success for an organization, and what is the time frame? And then you're basically forced to then consider these non-financials.
Maybe make it practical. You're sitting in various boards, and I got to know you as a true believer in this long-term success and bringing together sustainability and the business case. When you now say we need to retrain the finance people, what do you tell the CFOs in the executive board how to retrain its team, how to...
So in most situations, I don't think we actually need to retrain everybody, because I think there's a lot of understanding of that.
Also board
Maybe
members?
we start with board members, exactly right. But there is a lot of understanding that how we've been doing it is not really right. And it's come from the regulator, but it's also, and you talked about the consumer, it would be great if the consumer was more active in this area, but at least in many cases it's come from customers. Customers have said, I want to be able to say I'm whatever, and therefore they've gone to their suppliers, and that's trickled down and said, okay, I mean, some years ago, some suppliers had no idea what their CO2 footprint was, but were forced, therefore, to start understanding what it is. And only if you understand the data can you then make decisions about how you want that data to look in the future, and what activity you need to do. So I don't say that we fundamentally need to retrain them, but I think there are needs in the executive and from the supervisory boards into the executive to focus on targets that involve also success factors that are not just measured in short term. And that includes installing systems. We talked about needing not financial sustainability experts, because certain stuff we have not yet valued. We have not yet got a universally accepted methodology for making stuff comparable. And as much as we all will have innovation in circular economy, we have the intention to try and make our businesses more sustainable. We also need the finance guys, because somewhere along that journey they're going to be involved in critiquing and making the trade-offs. And so I think that overall understanding of what success is for the company, and then embedding that in the executive remuneration and the bonus schemes, I think that's the best way to focus also the young controller on what he needs to highlight for those trade-offs.
And the senior controller.
Thank
you so much. I think we're completely at the end of our time. Is there an urgent question from the audience? If not, Saskia, please, go ahead. One question.
One question. Yeah, Robin, I completely agree with everything you said. One question, I'm a sustainability expert with a background in economics, and I'm always surprised that ESG risks are not looked at on a more midterm or long-term basis. So how do we change that? I mean, I would love to have finance or accountants on my side, by my side. Yeah, but at the moment, I don't see many finance guys looking at ESG risks, for examples, or opportunities.
Okay, well, from my experience, I think we've come to it a lot from understanding what the risks, because at the very least in our organizations, we have a high focus on trying to identify risks. Maybe they're not quantified in the short term. That's a bit of an issue. Yeah? If they're too far away, or it doesn't affect me because my business model is not going to be impacted by floods or by whatever. But basically, it's that time horizon again. It's that understanding how will my business model be successful in the long term. And I think we need to get these guys to focus on that. And coming from the risk point is a very good way, because if you think of insurance companies and what insurance companies are now not providing in certain areas, businesses have to realize, oh, well, if I take this risk, I can't get insurance for it, then maybe that's another reason why I don't do that. Yeah?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Axel. Thank you very much for listening and being with us. There is a speaker's corner around here, maybe later for further questions. Looking forward to seeing you on the next panel.